scripture today will be, actually we're going to have two scriptures today. The first one is 1 Corinthians 9:24 through the 27th verse. And then we will read 1 John, the 5th chapter and the 4th verse. 1 Corinthians 9:24 through 27. Do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Therefore, I do not run like someone running aimlessly. I do not fight like a boxer beating the air. No, I strike a blow to my body and make it my slave, so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize. Amen. 1 John 5:4. For whatever is born of God overcomes the world, and this is the victory that has overcome the world, our faith. May the Lord find favor in the reading of these scriptures this morning. Thank you. Amen.
So far, so good. In the new year. And Happy New Year to everyone. You know, in 490 BC, the Persian army was attacking Greece in one of their several wars. And it's one of those, the popular money was on the Persians, the smart money was on the Greeks. And they won a pretty great victory, and one of their runners, in some accounts, gives a name of the runner, ran 24 miles across plains that you might have heard of. Anybody ever heard of a marathon? And carried a message that they wanted to hear that they had won. And as the story goes, he comes into town and announces, Nike Kamen, which means we are victorious, and then dropped over dead from exhaustion, from heat stroke and whatever else goes with that sort of thing. And this is a coin that was commemorative of that event, of that victory on the plains of Marathon that day. It's an owl with an olive branch, and I forgot what the letters AOE mean, but that commemorated it. Now, you might not have realized this, but the word Nike is in the Bible. Anybody ever know that? No. It actually is, believe it or not. And that little, I don't know if the swoosh is or not, but that word is, Nike, is in the Bible. 1 John chapter 5, verse 4. Whatever is born of God overcomes the world, and this is the victory. That is the Greek word Nike, or Nike, as I'm told how it's pronounced. That is our victory. So, yeah, it wasn't just a made-up word. When they started that shoe company several years ago, they used an actual Greek word, victory. And the Greek word for victory in this verse, Nike, is what our faith is. That is our Nike, or Nike, if we're going to be modern English about it. That is the victory that we have. And as we are getting started in a new year, I want us to think about victory. And the victory that we can have as Christians in a new year. We looked at the road to victory, and our two passages that Barry read for us here just a minute ago are going to have some thoughts and some keys to it, where we can have that victory in the race that we run, and that is called life. And as we are going forward into a new year, some may have made resolutions. And as I said last week, the only one I do not to make resolutions. I never seem to be able to stick with them very well. But I want us to think about here as we look at this, and notice a couple of things here. He said, do you not know that all who run a race all run, but only one receives the prize? There can only be one winner in a race. Run in such a way that you may obtain it. In other words, put your all into it. Everyone who competes for the prize is temperate in all things, that they train themselves. And then Paul is saying that he runs not with uncertainty. That's a double negative there, but he's running with certainty. He doesn't just beat the air like a boxer shadow boxing. He is disciplining his body and disciplining his mind. And I want to suggest to us for 2022 to run to win this race. As we're going forward into a new year, spiritually to grow. Look back over the last year. Are you more spiritual or better off now spiritually than you were a year ago? And you look at verse 24. Paul is running a race. He's in this to win. He is not just in this to finish. I had my 9th grade science teacher was on the 1976 cross-country Olympic team for the United States. And I had asked him one time, did you get any medals? And he just looked at me and he said, I was doing good to finish. I think at that time, I think there were about 160 or 70 participants. I think he finished something like 120th. Okay, he just got across. He had a ring from being on the team, and he had a nice jacket that he wore, and he didn't have a gold, silver, or bronze medal. He was able to just finish. And a lot of people in the race that he was in, and in the events he was in, were just doing that. They were just doing good to finish. But Paul says, no, don't run that way. Run so that you can win the prize. So are you running to win? If you want to win, you got to have the desire. Are you running to serve God and to grow more in your faith? You got to have the desire, because you got to want it. If you desire something, you want it. Do we want our congregation here to grow this year? Do we desire it? Then we've got to put the effort into it. Great desire is what you want something so bad that you can just taste it. You know, when you were a kid, maybe that new bicycle you wanted for your birthday, you just wanted it. Or maybe it was a case where mom or dad said, well, tell you what, you save your money for it. That really made you want it, didn't it? Every dollar, you're doing odd jobs. I'll rake the leaves for $1 or whatever it was that you got, and you put that away and save. And if you want that desire, if we have that desire, we can make it happen. And for a Christian to gain this victory, the Nike or the Nike, there's no greater desire than to be in a better relationship with Jesus. Amen. To want to know Jesus more. And the way we do that, of course, is you got to be in the Scriptures. You got to be in fellowship with your brethren. You got to be in constant fellowship with your brethren. We got to be more in prayer if we want to have that victory. We want to gain that close relationship with Jesus. Vince Lombardi once said that the difference between a successful person and others is not the lack of strength, not a lack of knowledge, but rather a lack of will. And stop and think about it. How many things do we accomplish in life if we don't put any effort into it? We don't have any desire. You see, Paul had a desire to win. He had a desire not only for himself to be in heaven, but he wanted as many people to come with him as possible. That's what I want to do. I want to be there in heaven, of course. I want as many people as possible to be there. But ultimately, I want to be there. I have more to say about that in just a second. But Paul's main concern is that he ran his race to fulfill this mission, to seek and save that which was lost. That's why Jesus came. That's why Paul's preaching. Why do we preach today in 2022? It's going to take me till March to write 2021 on it. Or 20. See, I can't even get the year right now. But it takes us a little while to make that adjustment, doesn't it? But we've got to be pushing ahead to seek and to save the lost. That is why Jesus came. That is why Paul did what he did. That's why we're doing what we do. To be in this race and get as many as possible to go with us, to seek and to save that which is lost, which is everybody outside of Jesus. And to get that good news out there. I don't know when the end of time is going to come. It could come at any time. Let's ourselves be ready and help as many people as possible to be ready for it. And then for 2022, let's persevere. Great works are performed not by strength, but by perseverance. Many times that's what it takes to get through a particular situation. Look at verse 25 in our text. Everyone who competes for the prize is temperate in all things. Or everyone who competes in the game goes into strict training. Years ago, I worked with someone, my first supervisor, with a law firm I was working with. She did the Ride the Rockies, which is about a week long, I think it was a week or 10 days long, bicycle ride through the Rocky Mountains. I don't know if they still do it or not because of COVID. But about a month or 6 weeks out before they did the Ride the Rockies, she went into training mode. She ate a lot more fruits and vegetables. She didn't do the fast food. She cut out the sub sandwiches she usually ate, and she started riding her bicycle to work instead of driving to get ready for this, to be prepared for this. If we want to be prepared for heaven, or get to heaven, we have to be prepared. We train here. This is where we make ourselves ready. This is where we go through all the time of training just like she did. Paul makes clear that winning spiritual reward requires discipline on our part. Look at athletes. The ones that do make the Olympic team. Do they just roll out of bed one day and say, hey, I'm feeling pretty good. I think I'll go down and try out for the Olympic track team. Anyone I've ever known who's dead, I've known 2 people who have tried out for the Olympics. And they trained for years. I had my science teacher, and then another one who just missed making the boxing team. But they trained for years to be able to do it. It wasn't something that they just got out of bed one day and did it. We have to keep pushing ahead. There's training that we do if we want to be able to make it. Persevere. Push ahead. Keep pushing towards the prize. Running is a good example of what Paul's talking about, because to run, you got to keep looking forward. You can't look over your shoulder at who's ever behind you. Because as soon as you turn your head, it slows you down. Even if you're just glancing, even if you're going, you want to wave hi to mom in the stands. That's there. You're going to slow down right away. Hebrews chapter 12, we need the perseverance because the race is going to be hard at times. Let us run, he says, with endurance, the race that is set before us. Fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. Just think of Jesus being ahead of you. He's out there, and you just keep going. Keep pushing ahead. When you do these endurance races, like a marathon, or the original one, there's going to be times when the course might get a little rough. The Ride the Rockies, for instance, there are times when the course is rough. The pictures in the paper, a lot of them will have someone changing a flat tire because they've hit something along the way. And the Tour de France, same thing. Those can be rough. There's hills, there's valleys there's curves they have to get around. It can get a little rough. Doesn't life for us sometimes get a little rough? That's what he's telling. Run with endurance. That's how we build endurance, is by pushing ourselves. That's how we gain strength to continue. There's a couple things here let's look at for gaining strength. Gain strength by looking away from our circumstances and fixing our attention on Jesus. You know, it's easy to get to where we're looking at our circumstances. It's snowing and there's a foot of snow in there. How am I going to get out of my driveway? And I'm looking at the circumstances. I've got this financial, burden coming that I don't know where I'm going to get the money for it. Focusing on the circumstances instead of focusing on Christ. It's tough to do sometimes, but turn the situations over to God through Jesus. Let Him get it worked out. And then remember to fix our hope on what He has promised to do for us. In Titus chapter 1, we're told there that God cannot lie. He has made promises. He cannot lie. That is something God cannot do, is to lie, do anything against His nature. Focus on the promises. And remember, the promises are not always given to us right away. God works things out in His own timing. It is tough for people, I know, especially for non-believers, to understand that. We like things done on our time frame. When you go to a restaurant, you've been waiting, and the service is a little slow. I'd like it to pick it up. Can you go check on my order? We can do that at a restaurant. We're the ones paying the bill, but we can't do that with God. It's on God's timetable. Gain our strength too by relying on the Lord's strength. Relying because God, remember, is exponentially, infinitely more stronger than we are. Rely on that strength, because Christ is the author and the finisher of our faith. Rely on Him and stick to it. Keep pushing on Paul is telling us to do here in the Corinthian letter. To keep the race, run the race, and then set a goal. Things don't typically happen unless we have goals. And look here in verse 26. He says, I run thus, not with uncertainty. Thus I fight, not as one who beats the air. But I discipline my body and bring it into subjection, lest when I have preached to, watch this, lest when I have preached to others, I myself should be disqualified. This really is one of a couple of passages that is the death knell to the idea of once saved, always saved. Because you notice Paul says, lest when I have preached to others, I myself should become disqualified. He wrote half the New Testament. He converted a lot of people, planted churches. Yet notice what he says. I myself could become disqualified. He's saying, I could fall short if I'm not careful. If I don't discipline myself, discipline my body and my mind. He's not bragging. Paul is simply stating a fact. He's not trying to boast. Remember, it's not boasting or bragging if you can do it. He is simply stating a fact that he has to discipline himself. And he was obviously an incredibly disciplined person. What we know about the education, being a Pharisee, and what all he had to do to achieve that. He was obviously incredibly disciplined. He is running, he says, to win. He's just not out for a casual jog or out for a morning stroll. He is running to win this thing. He is in the marathon to win, not just to finish. And for some people, life becomes a struggle. In fact, remember John Mark had turned back, was on his missionary journey. Well, he turned back. Others had a hard time keeping up with this faith. We don't know why he turned back. We just know that he did. But Paul is saying here you have to be willing to not just to finish, but to run and stay in the race. He's making the point that we should not practice for an event without a goal. My goal, if I go to a study with someone, is to get them to where they will want to become a Christian, want to be baptized. Doesn't always happen. But I have planted some seeds. I know I've heard back on some later that they did. And then there are others that the seed got planted somewhere else and I watered it a bit. And then they went on and someone else did it. I really don't care who baptizes them. As long as they are baptized and their name is added, they are added to the Lord's church. That's what I want. Whether you teach them or whether you baptize them, that doesn't matter. What matters is we've got a new name in the book of life. That's what's important. Too many times, though, we get to focusing on the task. More on the task than on the outcome, on the work before us. And we look at it and it looks daunting and overwhelming sometimes. But let's focus on the outcome. Keep our eyes on Jesus. Keep our eyes on the prize, on the goal. And I'm going to heaven here. I want you to come along with me. Just like a professional athlete has to focus on their goal, our goal is heaven. Our goal is growing the church. Our goal is winning souls. Changing lives is what we want to do. There's a well-known, it was years ago, a story of a man goes up to a bricklayer. There's two bricklayers working. Asks one of them, what are you doing? He says, what's the matter? Can't you see? I'm laying bricks. Goes to the next bricklayer. What are you doing? I'm building a cathedral. See, physically, they're both doing the same thing. They're laying bricks. But one of them is just looking at it as the present task. This is my job. This is what I do. The other is looking at the ultimate goal. I'm building a cathedral. I'm building something that's going to stand for a long time. That's going to be a work of art. We can look at it as, what are you doing? Oh, I'm just going to church. I'm just reading my Bible. I'm just doing it. What are you doing? I'm laying the groundwork for eternity. I'm preparing myself to go out and run this race that Paul's talking about. I'm preparing myself to go and bring somebody else into the race to go to heaven just like I'm doing. I'm looking at the whole, we would call it the big picture today. And to win any kind of a prize, you got to be a contender. You got to get into it. You got to be in the contest, just like when Muhammad Ali fought Sonny Liston in the second fight when he got into it. He had to train. And I was just reading yesterday about some of the training he went through, the intensity of it. It took a lot to prepare for that. We've got to continue to prepare and be just like that. Contenders are going to be goal-oriented. And winners are those contenders who reach for the prize, who push ahead. Goal-oriented. I want to win this race. I'm not just going to enter it to finish. I'm entering it to win. Philippians, Paul said, I press on toward the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus. I'm moving on. And we're also in the context, he said, I'm forgetting what's behind me. 2021 is behind us. Some of us are thinking, good. Some of us are thinking, I don't know, 2022 could be just like it, could be worse. I mean, each one of us has got a different situation as to how we're looking at the year. We're looking ahead based on our own individual criteria and situation, whether we're looking ahead with optimism or pessimism, or maybe somewhere in between. But there's nothing we can do to go back to 2021. We've got to take what we've got and move on. And the prize of the Christian life, most of us would say heaven. That is part of it. That's where I want to be. But there's more. There's a little bit more to it, because along the way I want to have a changed life. You know, how many of us have known that maybe your life was that way at one point, where it was pretty bad, but then somebody taught you the gospel and things turned around? I have never heard of anyone who said that they became an atheist and their life straightened up. You know, I got a hold of a book that taught me I came from nowhere, I'm going nowhere, there is no afterlife, and that made a new man out of me. You ever heard anyone say anything like that? But I've heard people say, you know what, my life was bad, I didn't pay my bills, I had a bad family life, but then someone came and taught me about Jesus. And I became a Christian, and over time, I got things straightened out. Now, I've heard people like that become Christians and do it, but I've never heard of anyone becoming an atheist and saying that. But let's look at this. Salvation is one of the things that we have in this life. Not just heaven, but salvation. Moving from darkness to light. Being saved from the penalty of sin. Being saved from that penalty because Jesus paid that price. Because Jesus came and God so loved the world that He sent His Son to die on the cross for us. For you, for me, for everybody. We have a process of sanctification, becoming more Christ-like. That saves us from the power of sin, where we can break sin's hold on us. Where we can have a new life by God's grace and by the mercy that God provides for us. Where we can have that better life. And then glorification, when we are ultimately transformed to be with Christ and we are removed from the presence of sin. When we can go and have that victory and hear, well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into the joy of your Lord. I want to hear that. I want all of us to be able to hear that. And then for 2022, the strength of discipline. What does discipline mean to you? In our language, we use discipline and punishment interchangeably. That's really not correct. Discipline, it's the same root as disciple. What's a disciple? It's a student. Not just a student, but it's a student who's really trying to be like his teacher. Look at verses 25 to 27, where he says, every athlete exercises self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable crown or a wreath, but we for an imperishable. I don't run aimlessly. I do not box as one beating the air, but I discipline my body and keep it under control. Lest after preaching to others, I myself should be disqualified. Disciplines his body. And the whole thing, the mind, the whole thing. So he stayed away from sin. Not to say his Paul was perfect, but he is intentionally trying to live a righteous life. He had his struggles, and we know that by his thorn in the flesh and that sort of thing. We know he had his struggles just like we do. But it doesn't mean we give in. We keep going on. He is training. I discipline my body, he says. Training. Just like an athlete does. The athletes who do their sport professionally, the athletes who run for the Olympics, eat a special diet, many of them. They have a workout routine that they do. Some of them are getting up at 4 or 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, spending a half hour, an hour stretching, and then going into their workout routine. They do it daily, or whatever their schedule is. They don't miss a time, is the point. They are that highly disciplined. Paul wants us to be as disciplined as we can. Are all of us going to do it? No. But doesn't mean we don't try. Doesn't mean we don't put some effort into it. Once again, champions train hard. They are disciplined in their behavior, in their lifestyles. They aren't just sitting in front of the TV, watching TV, or just laying on the couch. They got to get up and go to work. You can't be lazy and be a disciplined athlete, or be a disciplined anything, a disciplined student. I didn't always do so well in school. Why? Because I just didn't do it. I wasn't disciplined until I got to college and was actually writing the check for the tuition. And you got a little bit different perspective then, don't you, when you're actually paying for it. Champions are going to view their failures as temporary. Okay, we lost the game this week. All right, well, we got next week's game to get out there and prepare for, and then now let's go watch the film and see what we did wrong and what we need to do to change, so next week we'll win. Or maybe when they're out there, a runner who's out there, okay, your time today in the 100 meters wasn't as good as last time. What do we need to do to change that? And they learn from it. Okay, well, maybe this week I had an injury and I've got to go and take some time off and let that heal. Or maybe I need to change my diet. Whatever it is I need to do, I'm going to do it so that I can get out there and win this medal. And win the race is what we're doing. And in Hebrews chapter 12, beginning in verse 11, is where this passage comes from. Where he tells us that no discipline seems pleasant at the time, but it's painful. Later on, however, it produces righteousness. Discipline and having to get up sometimes and go through the training is not always going to be feel very good to us. Sometimes sticking to it, I really don't want it, but I've got to. I've got to stay with it. I really didn't feel like reading my Bible this morning or having my prayer time. That's when I really need to do it. That's discipline. When you do something and you don't desire it. When I roll out of bed and I want to go and sit down in my chair and do my reading, when I've got the desire to, I don't need discipline. But those mornings that I roll out of bed, really I'd rather go back to bed and sleep. Or I'd rather just sit here and veg out in front of the TV. Well, no, that's when discipline needs to kick in. No, this is my study time. Or if I'm an athlete, I really don't want to go and do my workout today. That's discipline. All right, but I'm going to do it. And sometimes on Sunday, you roll it in, I really don't feel like going to church today. Well, that's when I need to do it. That's the discipline part of it. I'm going to do it, even if I don't really have the desire to do it. Discipline replaces short-term pain with long-term rewards. Discipline is looking to the long term. This is January the 2nd. The short term is maybe, the weather's not quite so good outside, so I'm just going to stay home. Long term is looking ahead. I need to still be with the saints, whether I'm there in person, whether I get it online. I need to be with them. I need to be in my reading in the scriptures. And then it's hard sometimes to find people who are really disciplined, because a lot of people think discipline is more of a hardship. It's not really what I want to do. I want to be able just to say, well, I don't feel like doing something, so I'm not going to. Discipline is what is going to make us ready for the next, for life, for our kids. It's what's going to keep them in school, is having that discipline. It's going to keep us on the walking in God's light. Remember in Titus chapter 1, rather, this is talking about an elder, must be hospitable, one who loves what is good, who is self-controlled. Self-control is just another word for discipline. Upright, holy, and disciplined. So you got both of them there. Must hold firmly to the trustworthy message as it has been taught, so he can encourage others by sound doctrine, refute those who oppose it. This is talking about the qualifications for elders. But that's really something all Christians need to be doing. Billy Banks, you remember him doing Taibo years ago. He said, my mind has to control my body. See, and a person who is disciplined is going to be tempered like that. They're going to have that kind of control, just like these marathon runners. My brother ran several marathons years ago when he was younger, and there were times he wanted to quit. But it was discipline that kept going. There are times he said he would hit a wall and just feel like he, figuratively hit a wall. And then feel like he could move on. His muscles are burning up, he is in pain, but he kept going. This is what I've trained for. This is what I have been working on all these weeks and months, was to finish this race. As Christians, sometimes we are going to feel the same way. We're going to feel tired. We're going to not want to go on. But look what Paul says at the end of Romans chapter 8. What shall we say to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? He who did not spare his own son, but delivered him up for us all, how shall he not with him freely give us all things? Who shall bring a charge against God's elect? It is God who justifies. Who is he who condemns? It is Christ who died, and furthermore also risen, who is even at the right hand of God and makes intercession for us. And now watch this. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation, distress, persecution, famine, nakedness, peril, or sword? For it is written, for your sakes we are killed all day long. We are counted like sheep to the slaughter. Yet in all things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. Does that sound like someone who feels like they're losing? That sounds to me like someone who feels like he's running the race to win. I am persuaded that neither death nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor any other created, any other created thing shall be able to separate us from the love of God which is in Christ Jesus our Lord. Now, I want you to notice something about these. These are what I call third-party things, third-party events. They will not separate us from the love of God. In other words, if you go home today, you get home and your house is burned to the ground, that's not going to separate you from the love of God. You get laid off, you go into where you get laid off from work, that's not going to separate you from the love of God. Your investments, your entire net worth could drop to zero. That will not separate you from the love of God. The only thing that can separate you from the love of God is you. You can look at all that and let it get to you and say, well, God's not looking out for me, God's not doing whatever, and I'm walking away from Christianity. You can make that choice. That's up to you. That is the only thing that can come between you and God, is if you let things get between you and God. If you give up, you walk away, that will cause you to lose salvation. It is your choice. Everyone who has been born of God overcomes the world, and this is the Nike, the Nike, the victory that has overcome the world. That is our faith. They that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. Notice, wait upon the Lord. Sometimes God just may be doing nothing else and trying to teach you patience by having you wait on something. That's the Nike as we go into the new year. To set our faith in Christ and gain that victory. To be immersed, to have our sins forgiven if we're not a Christian. Or if we are a Christian, to come out of the starting blocks nice and strong. That's what we can do. To pray with one another, to encourage one another. And if we can help you in that, in any way, pray with you, whatever your need might be, let us know as together we stand and as we sing.